At just 18, Ayanda's life shattered in one night. Her father's eyes burned with rage when he saw her rounded belly. "You have disgraced this family," he roared, throwing her into the dark, rain-soaked street with nothing but a torn bag of clothes. She walked away, heartbroken, vanishing from his world. 3 years later, a sleek black car stopped in front of his house. When the door opened, the woman who stepped out was not the helpless girl he abandoned, and his jaw dropped. The rain had been falling for hours, drumming against the rusty tin roof of the small family home in a rural village in South Africa. The air smelled of wet earth, and the night was heavy with the sound of frogs croaking in the distance. But inside the house, the storm was nothing compared to the one raging in her father's heart. Ayanda stood in the center of the living room, her trembling hands clutching the edges of her faded shawl. The soft fabric did little to hide the undeniable swell of her belly. Her father's face, usually calm and warm, was now twisted into an expression she had never seen before. Pure fury. You have disgraced this family," he roared, throwing her into the dark, rain-soaked street with nothing but a torn bag of clothes. She walked away, heartbroken, vanishing from his world. "Is it true?" he demanded, his deep voice shaking the wooden walls. Her throat tightened. "Baba, Answer me." His voice cracked like a whip. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, silence fell. The only sound was the rain tapping the window pane. Ayanda thought, hoped, that maybe, just maybe, he would take a deep breath, calm down, and remember that she was still his daughter, that he would see the fear in her eyes and reach out to protect her. But instead, his lips curled with disgust. You have disgraced this family. You have shamed me in front of everyone." Her heart thudded painfully. "Baba, please, I did not mean... Do you think people will not talk? Do you think the neighbors will not whisper every time they see me? Do you think my name means nothing?" His voice grew louder with every word. She reached out for him, but he stepped back as if her touch would burn him. "I raised you better than this, Ayanda. You are no longer my daughter." The words sliced through her like glass. "Baba, please, I have nowhere to go," she sobbed, her tears mixing with the rain as wind pushed droplets through the open window. "Then you will learn to survive. Take your things and leave." The room spun around her. She felt as though the floor had been ripped from under her feet. Her mother, who had died years earlier, would have never let this happen. Ayanda wanted to scream, to beg, but she knew her father's mind was set. He was a proud man, too proud to see beyond his own shame. Slowly she walked to her small bedroom. The posters on the wall seemed to watch her as she stuffed a few dresses into a torn canvas bag. Her hands shook as she picked up the small knitted blanket her mother had made when she was a baby. She pressed it to her face, inhaling the faint scent of lavender, and felt her knees weaken. When she returned to the living room, her father stood by the door with his arms crossed. His eyes were cold, distant. Without a word, he opened the door. The cold night air slapped her in the face. Rain drenched her instantly, soaking through her thin dress. She looked back at him one last time, hoping, praying he would change his mind. But he simply stood there, unmoving. And then the door closed. The sound echoed in her chest like a final verdict. She was alone. She walked for hours through the muddy streets, her shoes squelching with every step. Her swollen belly felt heavier than ever. The streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to follow her. People glanced at her but quickly turned away. No one offered shelter. No one asked if she was all right. By the time she reached the edge of town, her legs were trembling, her lips numb from the cold. She collapsed on a bench outside a closed shop, pulling her shawl tightly around her belly. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried, a haunting reminder of the life growing inside her. That night, Ayanda made a promise to herself. If no one else would protect her, she would protect herself and her child. She would survive. She would find a way to stand tall again. And one day, her father would see her, not as the broken girl he cast out, but as someone who had risen far above his judgment. She just didn't know how yet.
The night after her father cast her out felt endless. Ayanda barely slept on that cold bench outside the shop. Every time she closed her eyes, the rain seemed louder, the wind colder, and the fear heavier. By dawn, her lips were dry, her stomach growled painfully, and her unborn child shifted restlessly inside her. She got up slowly, rubbing her belly. "We will be okay, my little one," she whispered, though she had no idea how. She wandered aimlessly until she reached the taxi rank in town. People bustled past her. Vendors shouting about fresh vegetables, taxi drivers honking impatiently. The smell of hot vet coke and fried fish made her mouth water, but she had no money. She approached an older woman selling roasted mealies. "Mama, please, may I have one? I am pregnant," she asked softly. The woman's eyes softened for a moment, but then she shook her head. "I am sorry, child. I have my own family to feed." Ayanda turned away before the woman could see the tears in her eyes. By late afternoon, her legs ached from walking. She ended up near the open-air market, where she spotted an old acquaintance, Naledi, a girl she had gone to school with before dropping out in her final year. Naledi's eyes widened when she saw her. "Ayanda? Is that you?" "Yes," she murmured. Naledi glanced at her belly and frowned. "Where are you staying?" Ayanda hesitated. "Nowhere. Baba told me to leave." Naledi's face fell. Without another word, she took Ayanda's arm and led her to a small 2-room shack on the outskirts of the township. The walls were patched with cardboard, the roof made of mismatched tin sheets, but it was dry inside. "You can stay here for a few days," Naledi said, "but I cannot keep you long. My boyfriend will not like it." Those few days turned into weeks. Ayanda did small chores for Naledi, sweeping, washing clothes by hand, fetching water. But tension grew quickly. One night, Naledi's boyfriend came home drunk, slamming doors and shouting about feeding strays. Ayanda knew she could not stay much longer. The next morning, she left quietly, slipping away before the shouting began again. Days turned into months. Ayanda slept wherever she could, sometimes in church doorways, sometimes on the floor of kind strangers' homes who could only keep her for a night or two. Hunger gnawed at her constantly. There were days she drank only water and chewed on dry bread crust to quiet her stomach. But through it all, she refused to give up. She began asking around for work, any work. Most people turned her away when they saw her belly. But one day, a middle-aged woman named Mama Thondi, who ran a small roadside cafe, agreed to let her help wash dishes in exchange for food. "You work hard, girl," Mama Thondi said one evening as Ayanda scrubbed a pot. "You remind me of myself when I was young. You will make it." Mama Thondi's kindness kept Ayanda going. She worked there until the final weeks of her pregnancy. On a warm afternoon while she was wiping down tables, her body tightened painfully. The baby was coming. A taxi driver who often ate at the cafe rushed her to the nearest clinic. The nurses moved quickly, guiding her through the long, painful hours until at last, a small, wailing cry filled the air. "It's a girl," the nurse announced, placing the tiny bundle into her arms. Ayanda stared down at her daughter. The perfect brown skin, the small hands curling around her finger. Tears blurred her vision. "Lindiwe," she whispered, which means, "We have waited." Those first months were the hardest of her life. Ayanda worked at Mama Thondi's during the day, with little Lindiwe sleeping in a basket beside the counter. At night, she read old books she found at the library, teaching herself business basics, saving every cent she could. She refused to be trapped in poverty forever. It was a slow climb. She learned to make and sell beaded jewelry using leftover beads Mama Thondi had once kept in storage. Tourists passing through the cafe began buying them. Soon, her small sales became steady income. But Ayanda wanted more. She dreamed of opening her own shop one day, a place where her daughter would grow up knowing her mother had built something from nothing. 3 years later, that dream began to take shape. And the woman she had become was nothing like the scared, shivering girl her father had cast into the rain. She was stronger, wiser, and soon she was going home.
3 years had passed, but Ayanda still remembered the sound of that door slamming in her face. She had left as a girl, shivering in the rain, carrying shame and fear. Now she was returning as a woman, strong, successful, and unrecognizable to those who had once pitied her. Her beadwork business, Lindiwe Creations, was thriving. What began as a handful of necklaces sold to tourists outside a roadside cafe had grown into a brand. Her designs were displayed at craft markets across the province, her name known among travelers and locals alike. Even the mayor's wife had worn her jewelry. But success could not erase the deep ache in her chest whenever she thought of her father. She had imagined hundreds of times what she would say to him if they met again. Would she forgive him? Would she confront him? Or would she simply walk away, proving with her silence that she no longer needed his approval? One quiet evening, as she locked up her shop, Mama Thondi came by. "You have done well, Ayanda," she said, her voice warm. "But you carry a shadow in your heart. I see it every time you smile." Ayanda lowered her gaze. "Some wounds, they do not heal unless you face them." "Then go," Mama Thondi urged. "Let him see the woman you have become." That night, Ayanda barely slept. She kept seeing her father's face, the disappointment, the rejection. She remembered walking away in the rain, wondering if she would live to see another day. Now, she was not that helpless girl anymore. She had fought, worked, and built a life from nothing, and she would show him. The next morning, she dressed with intention. Her emerald dress flowed like silk in the breeze. Beaded earrings, her own design, framed her face. She tied Lindiwe's hair into 2 neat puffs and dressed her in a bright yellow dress with white flowers, a burst of sunshine beside her. A sleek black SUV waited outside, a gift from a grateful client who had once been touched by Ayanda's kindness. As they drove toward her old village, her heart pounded harder with every mile. She saw the places she had once passed in despair, the market where she had begged for food, the church where she had prayed for strength, the muddy road she had walked barefoot in the rain. Each memory cut deep, but it also reminded her how far she had come. Finally, the car slowed. Her father's house came into view. It looked smaller than she remembered, the walls cracked, the paint peeling. Yet, to her, it still loomed like the mountain she had been climbing for 3 years. She stepped out. Villagers noticed instantly the expensive car, the elegant clothes, the little girl at her side. Whispers rippled through the air. Some recognized her immediately. Others squinted, trying to place the face that looked so familiar, yet so changed. Ayanda took Lindiwe's hand and walked toward the house. Her heels clicked against the dirt, each step heavy with history. She raised her hand and knocked. 3 slow knocks. Inside, there was movement, footsteps. Then, the door creaked open. Her father stood there. He looked older, smaller somehow. His once dark hair was streaked with gray, his face lined with worry. For a moment, his eyes scanned her without recognition. Then they widened. "Ayanda." His voice cracked on her name. She met his gaze steadily. "Hello, Baba." His eyes flickered to Lindiwe, whose small brown eyes studied him curiously. "Mama, who is this man?" the child whispered. Ayanda felt her throat tighten. "This is your grandfather." The words seemed to hit him like a blow. He stepped back slightly, his breath catching. Around them, villagers had stopped to watch. Their murmurs grew louder, but Ayanda kept him back, she said, softly but firmly. Not because I need anything from you, but because I wanted you to see me. The woman you threw away is not broken. Her father's lips trembled, his eyes glistened, but he said nothing. His pride fought with something deeper, regret. And in that charged silence, Ayanda waited, unsure if his next words would wound her again or finally begin to heal the scar he had left behind.
For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. The warm sun shone on the cracked walls of the house, the air thick with whispers from the villagers. Ayanda stood tall, her hand resting gently on Lindywee's shoulder, her father frozen in the doorway. His lips trembled, but still no words came. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but the reality was heavier. The air seemed to carry the weight of 3 lost years. Her father's eyes darted to Lindywee again. The little girl tilted her head curiously, her tiny hands squeezing her mother's fingers. "Mama, is he really my grandfather?" Ayanda's voice was steady. "Yes, he is the man who gave me life and the man who turned me away when I needed him most." A ripple of murmurs ran through the villagers. Some shook their heads, others folded their arms, waiting to see what he would say. Her father's chest rose and fell sharply. Finally, he stepped forward, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Ayanda, His voice cracked. He swallowed hard and tried again. "I was wrong." The words seemed to echo in the air. Ayanda's throat tightened. For so long she had wanted to hear those words, but they did not erase the cold nights she had spent in the street, the hunger she had endured, the fear of giving birth alone. She studied his face, the deep lines, the gray at his temples, the pain in his eyes. "I was a fool. I let pride poison my heart. I thought about the neighbors, the gossip, instead of my own daughter. And for that, I have lived with shame every day since you left." His voice broke completely. His hands shook as he reached toward her, then stopped, unsure if she would let him touch her. Tears blurred Ayanda's vision. She had promised herself she would not cry, but seeing the once unshakable man in front of her trembling like a child cracked something open inside her. "You hurt me, Baba. You left me to face the world alone, but I did not break. I built a life for myself and my daughter, not because of you, but in spite of you." Her father's knees seemed to weaken. Slowly he sank to the ground before her, a gesture so shocking that the villagers gasped aloud. He bowed his head. "I am begging you, Ayanda, forgive me." His voice was raw, stripped of pride. "Please, let me know my granddaughter." Lindywee looked up at her mother, her innocent eyes wide. "Mama, can we?" she asked softly. Ayanda felt the sun warm her face, the breeze carrying the scent of home. In that moment, she realized that forgiveness was not about erasing the past. It was about freeing herself from it. She bent down, placing her hands gently on her father's shoulders. "I forgive you," she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "Not for your sake, but for mine, and for hers." She glanced at Lindywee, who smiled shyly at her grandfather. Her father let out a shuddering breath, tears spilling freely now. He stood slowly, wrapping his arms around both of them. For the first time in 3 years, Ayanda felt the embrace of the man who had raised her. The villagers stood in silence, some wiping their own eyes. They had witnessed a moment not often seen, pride surrendering to love and a family piecing itself back together. As they stepped inside,
Ayanda knew the road ahead would not erase the pain of the past, but it would be a new beginning, one built on truth, humility, and the unbreakable strength of a woman who refused to be defined by her suffering. And as her father held Lindiwe for the first time, Ayanda silently vowed that her daughter would grow up knowing her worth, and that no one, not even family, could take it from her again.